Eagle 6 in the track.
Roger.
Over 1 bombs away. One's going to climb high above 20. You're south.
Eagle 6 radar contact. Eagle 6 is visual.
And it goes left.
Hello and welcome back to the DCS SITREP, where we discuss news and information about the world's premier combat flight simulator for the home PC, DCS World, produced by Eagle Dynamics. I'm your host, Prick the Hedgehog, and this week's episode centers on the major overhaul of the FA-18C by Eagle Dynamics, something that was actually mentioned some months back, I think on the Gonky and Mover show, where Wags talked about that being a update in progress or in process. We'll take a look here also at the very, very exciting first episode from Heatblur on their F4E Phantom 2, which they're showcasing right now. We also know this aircraft is in testing, I believe, with Eagle Dynamics and has a pending release date sometime in the near future, potentially, I think, in Q1. We'll have to wait and see. Let's start with some quick news on the ED sale, though, which has been extended until February 25th in the eShop, but will have ended on Steam, unfortunately, by the time you are watching this. The extension was in due part to a server failure earlier this week on one of the European servers, and that prevented people from logging on and accessing accounts. The issue, as I said, was apparently bung server somewhere in Europe, and as a result of that, and by way of apology, ED kindly extended the Lunar sale. Now, I suspect, for those of you who are upset about the Steam sale, that was probably a hard deadline that they couldn't flex out with Valve, so that's why that one hasn't been extended and ended, well, already by the time you're watching this. Nonetheless, it's a great time to dip into the eShop and do some look down, deposit down on some of those magnificent bargains across the board there. Campaigns, maps, obviously modules, and various other bits and pieces. Great time, like I said, to pick up some awesome bargains. Well, let's turn to kick the show off proper here to the FA-18C, where I agree actually with ED's blurb on this. It is one of their most popular modules and a little bit of a flagship for the company in terms of their extension into popular multi-role fighters, which now also includes their F-16C Viper. It was a very technical module for them to produce, primarily because of the depths of the systems, the complex flight model, and also its role as a naval fighter as well, which pushed really, I think, the boundaries of what a flight combat simulator could do with modern aviation simulation. Think of having to create the mechanics and the physics associated with landing on the boat, even just the arrestor hook system. There's a lot of work that went into this module, and it's been around for several years now. It's still being developed, and the next portion of that is, I guess, maybe a midlife update, I don't know. But anyway, let's take a little look at the extensive flight model overhaul, which key areas highlighted in the newsletter are as follows. We'll start with the flight model. So for the past several months, they say they've been improving the flight dynamics of the Hornet to represent the aircraft's unique flight qualities more accurately. Much of this has been focused on expanding the high angle of attack, or AOA, capabilities by adjusting the stabilizer scheduling. These changes will allow maneuvering of up to 50 to 55 AOA compared to mid-30s earlier. This expanded AOA capability will better allow players to take advantage of the Hornet's outstanding low-speed, high AOA maneuver capability. Note that this expanded capability can result in a dramatic loss of speed if not careful, which is extremely dangerous, as you then can potentially become a static target while you're hovering around there in the air. Another important improvement is the handling characteristics in powered approach, or PA mode, when landing, and during landing you will find achieving and maintaining on-speed AOA easier. This is tied to the flight control system changes, which is really interesting. Additionally, here they add that the nose pitch effects have also been added when the speed brake is extended and retracted to match the real Hornet. Overall aerodynamic damping has also been improved to better match the handling characteristics of the aircraft. So this is great news, and I'm pretty excited to test this out. Remember that there really is no alpha limiter on the Hornet, which makes it a very, very dangerous opponent in the BFM arena. I think there was a guest on the Fighter Pilot podcast who was a test pilot. He had flown a variety of aircraft, including the Hornet, and he told the audience that you had to really mind your P's and Q's when conducting BFM with the Hornet. It was a very capable aircraft. Now, the challenge, of course, which was mentioned, is the Hornet pilot has to manage their energy very, very carefully, because while the jet will give you those high alpha angles, as you heard in the description, you could end up dangerously slow, and that is a very bad tactical position to be in. And I think one of the Canadian pilots interviewed on the 10% True podcast earlier this year, or late last year, I should say, talked about the fact that you can be in afterburner and then just loitering there in very low speed and just a static target while your enemy is basically outflying you, because you have lost all your airspeed and the aircraft isn't able to recover. So it's got some really good characteristics, but also some things to think about in terms of energy management. So again, I'm very, very intrigued to see how this new model influences the aircraft around things like the boat and even in traditional landing pattern configuration. The current regime of the aircraft, I feel, can also get pretty balloonish and a little bit floaty, and it feels like it's kind of lacking mass. And I recall Gonki from the Mover and Gonki show, if you're not familiar with them, feeling that something was missing from the engine response time too, and this was an older video of his, and I went back and forth with him a little bit about this. I think the game struggles to really replicate mass, which is not an uncommon thing in physics systems within games. It's a very difficult thing to do, whether it's driving simulation and particularly with aircraft. I suspect that this new model might better mimic that sensation of mass and inertia modeling, which, as I said, is really challenging to do. Moving on to the flight control system. So they're saying here that has been completely reworked in all of the channels, and it provides much improved behavior when switching the control logic system between auto flaps mode or to half or full flaps, something we just talked about. So you will find the transition much smoother, they say here, with little to no uncommanded pitching movements. That's really important. Remember I talked about that ballooning effect. This will also make getting on speed during landings much easier. So really good news there. Roll characteristics have also been improved to better match the real aircraft, with greater stability in the roll in your channels. This also applies to improved behavior around the longitudinal axis when taking off. So really interesting overhauls there and improvements. Looking forward to seeing this. Additionally, the yaw channel FCS in the powered approach mode has also been adjusted to improve landing control in a crosswind. In total, the improvements in the FCS will make takeoff and landings much easier. Really interesting. So again, a reiteration of my earlier comment. Really interesting stuff, and should hopefully give you a little bit more realism and the feel of realism as the aircraft is being operated, especially in those low speed environments by the sounds of things. All right, so something more of a physics and what's the word I'm looking for here? Mechanical articulation. That's the word I'm looking for. So the landing gear shock absorbers were adjusted to match documentation and reference videos. Cool. The FA-18C's landing gear articulation is a complex and dynamic process that is accurately modeled for carrier recoveries and touch and go. Cool. This change also provides improved landing control in a crosswind and addresses excessive G-loads when landing. Whilst greatly improved, we will continue to tune this mechanic to allow even more accurate nose wheel touch and go behavior to allow lower airspeed rotation. Really interesting. Okay, so in addition to the landing gear mechanisms, the tires have also been adjusted to provide more authentic friction forces that will be apparent in crosswind takeoff and landings. So this is, again, like I said, sophisticated stuff, and something that we saw reference a little bit in the Flying Iron simulations of their A7E2, where they went into a lot of detailed description on the modeling that they're doing with that aircraft. I believe that ED also referenced the tire modeling on the Mosquito, which was something that they had implemented or were implementing, which is then going to be imported into other World War II aircraft and even into the jet aircraft as well. So that's to do with the air mass inside the tires and the way those things move and wiggle around based on the mass of the aircraft. So some really complex number crunching stuff going on there that does have an impact. And for those of you that do iRacing, you'll know that the tire modeling is a huge part of their physics approach to give a realistic grip feeling. You're getting all into interesting stuff with regards to how much tire is on the ground, the tire wall moving, heat, and all this kind of stuff. So not sure how much detail ED is going into that, but again, looking forward to the grip stuff that they talked about there and what it's going to mean for some of these maneuvers as we land on the boat and take off and landing and all that kind of stuff. It's really pretty funky, cool stuff, and I love nerding out on it. Anyway, we'll see what it feels like, I guess, in the game. All right, moving on to the engine, which I mentioned before was a topic we'll come back to. So engine transition thrust time was adjusted to be more accurate between afterburner and mill thrust modes. So the engine transition time is now faster from afterburner to idle. This allows you to reduce airspeed when cutting the engines to idle more quickly. Again, interesting. That should help, I would think, with the impression of mass. So again, helping you kind of gauge that a little bit better. This will be fun to see in action. It's not mentioned if this will also affect the spool up times, so the opposite way. It's important to bear in mind that for formation flying and tanking, you're constantly making these adjustments, presumably not through afterburner, because otherwise something's really gone wrong there. But the engines and jets require a degree of anticipation of throttle response. So in tanking, you'll find it's 3 movements: power on, power reduction, and then power on again to kind of catch your desired airspeed. So you'll sometimes hear also the term walking the throttles as well, where pilots are sort of moving or massaging the levers with the heel of the palms. I heard this with F-14 pilots talking about landing on the boat. So it's this constant, jigging, if you like, of the engines. It's an art form, and again, I'm eager to see how this new engine model operates and whether it helps or mimics the sensation of mass, centrifugal forces, and inertia, which again is hard to recreate in video games. Cool stuff. All right, lastly here, what have we got? A couple more topics. Autopilot. So this has been improved by tuning its behavior when initiating an altitude hold mode while the aircraft is unbalanced. The updated autopilot also improves holding the set altitude when in a roll and initiating an altitude hold mode. Before, you would often lose or gain hundreds of feet during this process. And lastly, the autopilot control is much smoother when transitioning through waypoints and coupled modes. So again, cool, they've fine-tuned that system, and that, I guess, is in response to the other flight model and engine tweaks that they have. None of these things operate in isolation. That would make sense. Once you adjust one thing in a core area of the flight model, this is going to have an impact in the way other automated control systems operate, and I guess that would explain the adjustment here. And also the next item, which is the automatic carrier landing system, or the ACLS. When activating that in coupled mode, the autopilot will use smoother and improved approach behaviors. In essence, I expect, or at least I'm hoping for overall in this, an aircraft which feels more precise, a lot less vague in certain circumstances or envelopes, while also still having more nose authority, as in the case with the real jet. One area, as we already talked about, was that ballooning effect during flaps down maneuvers or transitions into different flaps configurations, and other minor quirks which can make it challenging to keep it tight during pattern landings, but especially around the boat where the parameters are a lot tighter and a lot more time contingent. A lot of this is also down to pilot experience, of course, practice and skill, which does really, really help, and also degrades really quickly the longer that you're away from performing those kinds of maneuvers. I doubt that I could land the aircraft right now. I haven't done a landing on the boat in months. Actually, that's not true. I did one recently. I did make it, but the AOE was terrifying. That I don't know what I was doing. Anyway, that's another story. But again, overall, very interesting. Really looking forward to being able to compare the two flight models. And I haven't flown really the Hornet all that much lately, so I'm going to be very excited to see what ED does with this in terms of those tweaks, and if there's any lessons here from this flight model update that carries over to other aircraft in the future. Fun stuff.
Silent 3, push man, prime 300.225.
All right, well, let's move on to the second half of the show today, and that's going to focus on the Phantom 2 reveals. And as most of you probably saw on YouTube yesterday, Heatblur are at it again. They published another episode on their series of featurettes for the Phantom 2. This was the first one, they said, and this one provided kind of an overview of the project and let us know there'll be, as I said, several more episodes covering various features like weapons, systems on the aircraft, and I think this kind of hints what is looking like a fairly soon release, although I was shocked to see people getting into it with Big Newy a little bit on Facebook, just in the comment section, kind of going back and forth. People had questions, and there was sort of some spear throwing about regards to when the release was actually going to occur, and people making deductions about what was insinuated, if you like, in the blurb. Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to dwell on that too much, but it's amazing how vitriolic people get very, very quickly over these things. We're going to get 2 variants during the course of the early access release from Heatblur, beginning with what they described as the fairly vanilla F4E45MC, which will feature a digital scan converter group radar, slatted wing, which was introduced to provide better low-speed handling, and what Heatblur also described as many other improved systems. These are either through retrofits or technical orders to update the aircraft over its flying lifetime. So later on in the early access process, the team will introduce the DMAS ARN101, which will be equipped with the Tizio system, PaveTac, and more sophisticated weaponry. No date in the timeline was provided, so we're not going to know, unfortunately, at this time, how long it's going to take to get the more upgraded version of the aircraft, so we'll have to wait and see. This is not uncommon. Remember, too, that Argus did this rather brilliantly, too, with 3 variants of the F1 aircraft. That was very well received, and they did it in fairly quick succession. It's unknown yet, as I said, how long it's going to take Heatblur to produce, if you like, or release the second variant. Nonetheless, still very, very exciting, and the team advised that this is a culmination, in terms of this project, of almost 3 years of meticulous research and artistry to bring the jet into the digital playground in DCS world. The team are bringing in several firsts, remember, and revamps from earlier projects, including things like Jester 2, which has been completely overhauled, and that took them a long time. The interactive manual, which we had talked about recently in another video, which was a huge area of work for them, and also some rather interesting UI interfaces that are coming, like the new crew chief system and animations for character movements as well. So there's lots of stuff that they've brought to this project, which is going to really up the ante and raise the bar for DCS modules. So a brand new wear and tear system is part of that, and that will be incorporated into the jet with thousands of components interacting with each other to make the aircraft more organic than other DCS products. Each can individually fail or create chain events if interconnected. They've gone down to extreme detail, including modeling of friction on the dials even, which I think is a really unique option for an aircraft, which, remember, is largely analog. And I suspect this will give, as they say, the pilot a much more realistic experience, and will definitely carve a divide between the digital aircraft in the game, so those Gen 4 aircraft, certainly the Eurofighter, which is going to be a late Gen 4 aircraft, and the analog monsters like this F4 Phantom, which is from really a bygone era now. To use an automotive reference, the fire-breathing Ferrari F40 compared with the more modern luxury hypercars of the last decade or so. Each is fast and dangerous and very, very exciting, but the former F40 offers a much more visceral experience and human engagement need than perhaps the latter aircraft offer. So especially with the digital flight control systems, the fly-by-wire systems, again, this is going to be an organic experience, I think. Ward Carroll kind of made that mention too when he was talking about what it was like in the back seat of the F14. He said you had to kind of constantly manage the circuit breakers, and he kind of compared it to being a cathedral organ player as you push and pull the stops to keep the thing running and the breathing machine going. So again, a sort of more organic, visceral experience, and that is going to be very much a part of the crew coordination that Heatblur talked about as well in the video. There will be a full complement of weapons, of course, available for the aircraft on release in both air-to-air and air-to-ground roles. This will include things like Pave Spike, targeting pods, the Shrike, the Walleye weapons, and much, much more. It will be a hands-on aircraft, as we've described, and players will be able to conduct multi-crew operations from day one. Those crews that are well coordinated are obviously going to benefit from getting the best out of the aircraft with more seat time, etc., over those who don't really play it very often or are a little bit more casual. So it's going to be an involved aircraft, even though it's not as complex as, say, the F-15E, the F-16, and the F-18 as examples. One thing I did pick up on in a recent 10% True interview with Starbaby is that there really are no true Wild Weasel mission sets anymore. That knowledge, I guess, has been lost as an art form post the disbanding of those dedicated units. Seed today, he sort of pointed out is quite a bit different. It's not really a Wild Weasel role per se. There really isn't also any other Air Force in the world that does Wild Weasel in that capacity that the US Air Force did and the Navy did. So we don't have reference points, if you like, for this kind of work that the Phantoms did, particularly I think in Vietnam. It's really only the US military that truly performs overarching, if you like, comprehensive SEAD work. Other air forces or units and assets, say from NATO, would slot into a broader portion of that, but they're not necessarily doing that kind of comprehensive SEAD work as individuals. It requires a much more comprehensive set of assets to throw at that particular problem and to dismantle those systems. So in other words, there really will be some interesting opportunities to try to recreate some of these mission sets, although Starbaby also rightly pointed out really that the DCS environment doesn't have a true air defense environment replicated. You could probably try to piece together at a micro level some sort of version of that, I think, so a watered down version, if you're able to gather some information about the tactics of what was used. But I think in terms of true electronic warfare and the RWR systems and all the rest of it, it's really murky. And a lot of this is quite rightly covered by secrecy. Even older systems, data available for those things is relatively limited. Now, Heatblur pointed out that the RWR system on the Phantom, they have revamped. It's a new system that they created for the Phantom, and remember that is going to be injected in some way into ED's mimicking, if you like, or replication of RWR systems in other aircraft in the game. It won't take away, though, the lack of Wild Weasel knowledge, if you like. Doesn't mean to say that you can't try it, like I said, but it doesn't take away from what Heatblur described as the broader mission set of the Phantom, which really they described as a jack of all trades. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it fits into the niche of the DCS environment. And I'm also kind of curious as to the cross-pollination stuff that's going on between teams like Heatblur and ED to create a more, I guess, realistic rendition of some of these systems and ultimately, I guess, some of the tactics that need to be deployed. And that's an area of trickiness for Eagle Dynamics because Wags has talked about in the past the limitations that they can do with BVR tactics. And I guess also this whole electronic warfare environment is very, very murky, like I said before. Now, the team reminded us too, as I said before, that they will have more videos coming out. We're talking Jester 2, we're talking the weapon system, crew chief operations, and also the flight model and the radar system. So not sure how many videos we're going to have over the next few weeks or even months. And again, whether or not this is going to be a Q1 release still, or are we going to merge into Q2? As I've said many times, while the aircraft is an older analog machine, the team, if they produce a product which checks all of the boxes of public expectation, quality, and functionality, this is a module that raises the bar for DCS modules. I can't wait to get my hands on it and just see how high that bar is based on the descriptions that they're providing us. One thing that I think is also very, very positive, as I said, is this cross-pollination thing between modules like this and what it's going to mean for ED as a developer. I think it benefits the community, obviously, and as the franchise continues to grow in popularity, as more modules come on board, this is only going to be good for the game in general, and the polish of some of these modules really does spark, I think, some competition amongst these developers, which can only be good for DCS players. So we have a packed pipeline this year too, with various modules set for release, maps as well. So stay tuned for more information. I think this will do for this week's SITREP. Let me know what your thoughts are on the pending Phantom 2 release, and of course those new features for the Hornet. They're both very, very exciting projects. Don't forget to pick up items on sale in the Lunar sale being offered right now in the eShop from ED. That's a really good time, like I said, to pick up some great bargains. All right, well, that will do for this week's SITREP. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Phantom 2 from Heatblur, what you like about it, what you're looking forward to, and also the new features for the Hornet, same thing, what you like about that. Both are very, very exciting projects. In general too here, thanks for all the likes, subscriptions, and comments. It really does support the channel and also challenges the YouTube algorithms for attention. Thanks a bunch to those of you who support me through the super thanks button. That also helps the channel chug along and gives it viability, because it is not financially rewarding doing these videos, which take many, many hours. And YouTube, for those of you in the know, not exactly, I'm not exactly getting a great cut for the YouTube advertising, given the amount of work that goes into it. I do it for the love of the channel, love of the franchise, the interaction with the third-party developers and ED, and this growing and increasingly popular franchise with such cool content, and allowing us to get to do a little bit that we'll never be able to, and this helps provide a little bit of satiation for a dream that most of us can't live. Don't forget to check out my other topics too over the last few weeks, including the Pinemax Crystal VR headset review. We'll do more reviews on that. Some of you probably saw Mover's video on the same headset. Pimax seems to have been picking up on the DCS content creators, and as well as my review on the Winwing Orion 2 earlier this week. If you're looking for a discount on the Pimax and want to support my channel that way, somebody has already done that. Somebody purchased a unit. I don't know how many other people have as well, but use the discount code PricklyHedgehog72 in the Pimax store. That'll give you $50 off. That gives me a little bit of a kickback. Also remember, if the Phantom 2 is released in Q1, I will be doing a giveaway of that module. If it blows over Q1, and we move into another portion of the year, I'll do a second giveaway for being wrong. That's my penalty. That's my guess right now, is that it's going to be a Q1 release, although the clock is ticking. So again, potentially a couple of good giveaways there on the Phantom 2. So keep your eyes peeled on the channel for more information on that. That'll do. This is Prickly Hedgehog out. We'll see you next time. Cheers, everybody.
Campbell 01, verify your Eagles 40,000.
Campbell, affirmative.
That's